What do I think education will be like in the 100 years?
That's a great question.
Vastly different from what it looks like today.
A lot more of it is going to be distance learning.
It could be a lot of learning based on screens and Skype.
I think education in 100 years will look a lot more student-run, student-led.
I think that in 100 years, institutions like this will still be around.
Whatever it is, I know Peabody will be a leader in it.
By the early 1900s, there had been a college located on this piece of downtown Nashville real estate for over 100 years. Folks had even taken to calling the area College Hill. It was hard to imagine things would ever change.
Lindsley Hall contains the laboratories, the library, and the sorority rooms. Dr. Hill, our psychology teacher, and dog. Elvie Sutcliffe.
Peabody Normal School student Minnie Elvie Sutcliffe certainly didn't see the change coming. She had no idea that in a few years, the college she was photographing for her scrapbook, the college funded by philanthropist George Peabody, would vanish. She had no way of knowing that what had always been would soon be gone forever.
Soon we shall look back upon our college days, days of pleasure, even though mingled with cares, as upon joy departed. Garnet and Blue, 1902.
George Peabody's original goal had been to help revive a South ravaged by the Civil War. Historian Paul Conkin.
His was a vision for a reviving South, and education being the center of that.
It is the duty and privilege of the more favored and wealthy portions of our nation to assist those who are less fortunate. George W. Peabody.
George Peabody's assistance would come in the form of a couple of $1 million for a so-called normal school in Nashville.
A normal school is different than a university. It really was like it's a 2-year program to training teachers.
These pictures were taken on the coldest day of winter of 1908-1909.
The Peabody Normal School offered students the total college experience. Along with the usual academics, there were music ensembles, gym classes, literary societies. Minnie herself played a little basketball, dated Mr. Floyd, as she called him, and went riding in fancy cars. By the end of 1911, Peabody Normal School could boast a proud history. Since its opening in 1875, the school had issued 2,600 teacher certificates, including one to Minnie Elvie Sutcliffe. Bottom line, Peabody Normal was a success. So why not leave well enough alone? Money, of course.
Vanderbilt and Peabody, new college to be located adjacent to the university, under separate control. The Nashville Banner, August 9th, 1909.
It was all over the newspapers. Peabody was putting some distance between itself and downtown. Not everybody was happy.
It was a battle that engaged half the people in Nashville. It was continuously publicized. People chose sides.
James Porter, former Confederate general, former Tennessee state governor, now Peabody president, led the fight to keep the school in downtown Nashville. Meanwhile,
behind his back, a group of conspirators were working hard to move it.
The lead conspirator was Vanderbilt Chancellor James Kirkland. At stake, a $2 million, 4-year teachers' college. As far as Porter and his supporters were concerned, Vanderbilt was trying to steal the new college. Was Porter right to feel betrayed?
He was betrayed, but he was wrong in his estimate of what would be good for the future of Peabody.
Porter lost the battle. He quit. The school would soon move.
closeness of affiliation, speculation as to relationship between Vanderbilt and Peabody College, the Nashville Banner.
Did the move mean Peabody and Vanderbilt would combine forces? The Vanderbilt chancellor sure hoped so.
And by the way, Kirkland at one point was willing to give up even the name of Vanderbilt to have a unified university with the two, because he was so dedicated to having the two cooperate.
Still, a merger seemed unlikely, for right after the Peabody board decided to move the college, they hired Bruce Ryburn Payne to run the place. Merger-wise, it was not a good fit.
Payne wanted to give everybody a chance, recognizing that many of the people from the rural South had not had good primary, let alone secondary education.
You've heard a great deal about standards which are to keep the majority out of school. I am begging you today to discover new modes of teaching and standards that will keep them in school. Bruce Payne.
So Bruce Payne's Peabody College would end up being
less elite, more informal, friendly, open, egalitarian type of campus, warm and supportive.
When the college was established at its present location in 1914, its environs were rocky and austere. President Bruce R. Payne felt strongly that a college campus should be a place of beauty and quickly set about to transform the landscape. Sherman Dorn, Peabody historian.
Bruce Payne didn't tackle the campus beautification project alone. He had an able assistant just back from World War I, an ex-sailor named Roy Appleton.
I don't think any one professor contributed as much to the welfare of Peabody as he did.
Roy Appleton began the conversion of Peabody's rocky and austere environs with a handful of seedlings.
Every one of those trees on the quadrangle, he planted them, and of course they're now pretty magnificent.
Charles Appleton grew up right alongside his daddy's trees and was soon helping out.
As soon as I was old enough to do anything, Dad would always give me some kind of little job, piddling job around the campus.
After he was named Peabody's superintendent of buildings and grounds, Roy Appleton began planting thousands of irises, as documented in his handwritten work diaries.
Irises planted and gardened from North Row, 57 varieties. Count them and see.
He particularly liked iris, and so he planted iris all over the campus. If there was a bare spot on that campus, it wasn't bare for long because he was going to have iris planted on it.
And come spring, the sudden burst of color emanating from Peabody iris beds was enough to, well, make a young girl dance. In time, the iris would become a symbol of Peabody. Over the years, local gardeners created new varieties of the iris and donated them to Peabody.
I think he was a Johnny-come-lately maybe to it.
Turned out James Kirkland was a founding member of something called the American Iris Society, and in 1938, his hybrid, Copper Luster, won the coveted Dykes Medal of Honor for Best of the Best American Hybrid. Whatever.
But he got publicity, and I think my dad may have resented that Kirkland got credit for iris when Dad had planted so many of them.
But for Roy Appleton, it wasn't just Chancellor Kirkland and the Iris Wars that got him all riled up. It was Vanderbilt in general.
21st Avenue was, boy, it was a front line of a war. He just didn't cross that line.
By the late 20s, the hairstyle called the bob, roughhouse football, and the automobile had become fixtures of Peabody culture.
At this time, we present the 101st program of the Teachers College of the Air. These programs in themselves are intended as salutes to American childhood and its place in the affairs of the nation.
Enrollment at Peabody would drop to about half during the Depression, and the school rode out the economic crash by cutting costs, but it never had to reduce faculty salaries.
Army air training here practically dominated the campus for 2.5 years.
During World War II, the Army Air Corps took over about half of the Peabody campus to train pilots. Both the Army and Peabody continued hallowed traditions, the Army staging parades, Peabody staging dances. After World War II, veterans taking advantage of the GI Bill flooded the campus. Peabody built a special Veterans Village to accommodate the ex-soldiers and their families.
They still had barracks on campus, which were a lot cheaper than the dormitory, and there were, I don't know, 20 or 30 of us there, but since I was used to the barracks in the Navy, it was fine.
Post-war scholarship winners included one of Peabody's most famous alumni, a very young and very photogenic Betty Page. Why is Betty famous? Let's just say Betty was sultry when sultry wasn't acceptable.
Just apply, they accepted you.
When Henry Hill took over as president in 1945, Peabody College was still operating under the, shall we say, laissez-faire philosophy of predecessor Bruce Payne.
More the merrier.
That is to say, things remained a bit loose, even disorganized.
They had no departments. There was no tenure system. Standards were low. No clear mission. He never fired anyone unless they committed adultery or something of that sort.
There was not even a chain of command.
The president had done everything at Peabody.
With the help of a gaggle of committees, President Henry Hill would fix all that, even coming up with a new mission. From now on, Peabody would be a liberal arts-leaning undergraduate college with a world-class graduate school of education.
The glory period for George Peabody College, I think, was the early 50s when I was here on campus.
Now, mister, tell us who you be. My name is William Walker. I'm a singing school teacher.
The Peabody Summer School flourished in the 50s.
It had up to 5,000 students here in the summer.
Coursework included opera and what the French call plein air painting. A hit from the start, the summer school catered to adults working on advanced degrees. And not only was it educational, it was fun. Along with classes taught by distinguished visiting professors, there was croquet, cookouts, horseshoes, not to mention watermelon cutting. Yes, that's Roy Appleton again with the big knife. In June of 1955, Roy Appleton crashed the Modern Art Party at Peabody's Cohen Fine Arts Building. On exhibit were paintings like this one by Abraham Ratner. Roy just didn't get it.
It was really modern art. And Dad looked at some of that stuff, and he thought it was absolutely atrocious.
Like it or not, Roy did find the art inspiring.
He went in the paint shop, and he got yellow paint, roofing tar, any kind of thing he could paint.
Then, Roy Appleton, groundskeeper, morphed into Roy Appleton, artist.
I wasn't trying to paint a picture. I was really diligently and conscientiously trying not to paint a picture.
My job was to stand behind him and to tell him anytime that picture got to look like anything, he was to mark it out and to make it look like nothing.
When the painting was done, Appleton marched it over to the Fine Arts Building and hung it next to all the other modern art. Fit right in, said one observer. 10 days later, somebody noticed and the story made newspapers coast to coast. It was the opening salvo in a Peabody culture war.
Anyone who views this group of paintings without sensing the quality of and sincerity of each one of the artists included is simply lacking in sensitivity or imagination. Louise LaQuire, art critic, Nashville Banner.
As superintendent of buildings and grounds, one of my duties is to keep rubbish and litter off campus.
This is modern art. It's a natural expression of the age you are living in.
One of my duties as superintendent of buildings and grounds has been to create a beautiful place for our students to enjoy. To me, these pictures were not helping in that endeavor.
Right. Is that what your picture is about? The three what? There.
They were poor, they were black, and not only would they struggle in the classroom, tests of children up through 5th grade showed the longer they stayed in school, the worse they performed. In the late 50s, the so-called experts thought that was a problem that couldn't be fixed.
Yeah, because people believe IQ is immutable, it was unchangeable.
Peabody's Susan Gray would be the first to prove the so-called experts wrong. Gray and her team ventured into the poorest neighborhoods, reaching kids long before they enrolled in kindergarten.
The genius of Susan Gray was not to jump into 5th grade to work on the problem.
In an experiment dubbed the Early Training Project, Susan Gray would prove not only that poor black children could learn, but that they could do it starting at the age of 3. She proved early childhood education worked. Other studies would come to the same conclusion.
The design of the study was held up as a model research design for studies of its kind, and it found
that if children in school settings got those experiences that they were missing at home, they would do much better in school.
Well, now look at it. Really look at it and feel it.
The early education model soon spread as researchers discovered that children with intellectual and developmental disabilities could also learn. It was none too soon.
It was not unusual for pediatricians to advise parents of newborn children with developmental disabilities to institutionalize them immediately before you have time to become attached.
A sympathetic teacher can work miracles with a withdrawn child.
Attitudes began to change as most realized
we should not throw children away simply because they are different. They have potential that the rest of us need.
Mr. Shriver, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests.
Meanwhile, in Washington, Lyndon Johnson launched the War on Poverty.
We set out to make certain that poverty's children would not be forevermore poverty's capital. We called our program Project Head Start.
It's a program that got its start after the man in charge, Sergeant Shriver, made a visit to Peabody College.
When they saw what this preschool was doing, our experimental preschool was doing, Sergeant Shriver said, we need to do this on a national scale. And that was the spark for Head Start.
Peabody was ready to go, had a head start on everybody else.
In 1965, the federal government announced plans to finance a dozen new research centers on what was then called mental retardation. Cue the Dream Team.
They were very well-known people nationally and internationally in their respective fields.
Lloyd Dunn had made a name for himself with the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test.
Probably the PPVT is the most widely used intelligence test in the world.
Nicholas Hobbs's bailiwick was the education of emotionally disturbed kids. Susan Gray you know about. Given this lineup, it was not surprising that one of the dozen research facilities funded by the feds wound up at Peabody. They would call it the John F. Kennedy Center, and that center
made little old Peabody in the late 60s and early 70s one of the powerhouses in child-related research and doctoral programs in the world.
In the year of our Lord, 1964, all clean-living, God-fearing Peabody College co-eds were expected to comply with certain ironclad rules. like it or not.
Oh my gosh, they were horrible.
We couldn't wear slacks 50 years ago.
We even had to wear coats over our clothes if we wore shorts to the gym class.
We are the girls from 4th floor North Hall, yes. And we came from everywhere for funny, different reasons, but we just bonded.
Of course, we had a 9 o'clock curfew.
And you could get away with anything till 9 o'clock.
You can believe that.
We had 2 or 3 telephones in the lobby, booth 2 or whatever, and you'd go down and get your phone call.
If there was a man that came into the dorm, they would yell, "Man on the hall!" Your room door had to be open if there was a guy there. You had to have 2 feet on the floor.
That was where I got my education, in the dorm.
I also think, though, that about the curfew, that it really helped us in that dorm situation gel as a group.
And learned if you want to make it in the world, you have to be good to everybody.
I mean, I think if we had 11 p.m. curfews or no curfews at all, I'm not sure we would be the same group that we are today, because you were a captive audience. You were there. You had nowhere else to go.
If we hadn't merged, there wouldn't be a Peabody. Flat out. We needed a stable institution to be part of, and that was Vanderbilt.
It was a money thing. After years of generating red ink, the independent George Peabody College for Teachers, a college that could trace its history back more than 2 centuries, was no more.
Of course there was anger. You know, this had been our sacred place.
While Peabody President John Dunworth would shoulder the blame, the merger of Peabody and Vanderbilt had been a long time coming. Sharon Shields helped organize a faculty-student protest.
We dressed in our academic regalia. We marched from the Common Center across the mall to in front of the administration building.
40-some people lost their job. I think the success, though, of Peabody as part of Vanderbilt has confirmed the rationale for the merger. It didn't hurt Peabody. The merger saved Peabody.
And I think it's important to know where ethics come from.
Following the merger, Peabody was still stuck with the same old problem: how to raise enough tuition money to keep the doors open. Not to worry, for the new Peabody
was not only to be a college of education, but a college of education and human development. 2 missions.
So Benet's IQ test.
And that new undergraduate program was a major called HOD, Human and Organizational Development. The ideal student?
Undergraduates who were interested not just in going out and getting a job, but in going out into the community and improving the nature of the community.
So for the first half of the term, we learned about the different problems that exist in our communities. And the second half of the term, we start talking about the solutions that existed to those problems.
Semester-long internships expose students to not only careers, but careers with a conscience.
That's just part of our curriculum, and we build that into the curriculum, that sense of social responsibility.
The language for success is, what do you predict?
Today, HOD is one of the most popular undergraduate majors, not only at Peabody, but in all of Vanderbilt University. The new major also fits right into the Peabody culture that originated with founding father Bruce Ryburn Payne 100 years ago.
He'd have loved it. The fact that people are committed to a life of service in the larger community. He would have loved that.
Educational neuroscience is a very newly formed field.
I mean, if we were going to make this into...
Welcome to the future. This is where teaching, the art, meets teaching, the science. In this study, Peabody College and the Vanderbilt Brain Institute have teamed up to lead an interdisciplinary program in a relatively new field called educational neuroscience.
So you may have 2 kids in first grade who are reading just great or doing math just fabulously in the fall. One of them grows and one of them doesn't. And the question is, why does that happen?
The goal of educational neuroscience is to find out how exactly the brain goes about learning. That knowledge then will be exported to classrooms all over the world in hopes of making teachers better teachers and students better learners.
I think it will change how teachers teach and students learn.
Ambitious? Yes. But so are Peabody's trailblazing initiatives in everything, from school reform to special education. Given the college's history, would we expect anything less?
What will Peabody look like in 100 years?
Oh my gosh.
Peabody College is not its buildings and it's not its land. Peabody is its people.
So now the question is what Vanderbilt will be like 100 years from now.
I think you're still going to find real live human beings working with real live human beings.
Peabody in 100 years? It's hard to imagine.